Before this video begins, I want you guys to think of three little words. Wait and see. These words basically contain the message of the video you're about to watch, and it's important that you keep the phrase in the back of your mind. So, let's begin. As the internet's #1 authority on the character of Venom, a title I take very seriously, I figure it's only appropriate I weigh in on the current run of all new Venom. Further than that, I'm going to explain why the reaction has been so negative, why I personally kind of like the series, and why this video is not about Matt Gargan's Venom like I promised the next Venom video would be. You see, the next time I planned on talking about Venom, I intended to talk about the 8 years of the character's lifespan where the symbiote was not attached to Eddie Brock, but instead several other hosts, the most prominent of which was Matt Gargan. The twist was going to be that those 8 years actually ended on a somewhat high note, as we also saw the introduction of Flash Thompson as Agent Venom, one of the most beloved legacy characters in Marvel Comics history. Or at least, I consider him a legacy character. I understand if you don't, but since then there's been a lot of discussion about Venom's current host, because guess what, fuckface? Eddie went back to not having the Venom symbiote eventually. It bounced between a few hosts such as Peter Parker and Dylan Brock, and right now Eddie is living his Dexter fantasies with Carnage and seems to be a member of the new Thunderbolts team. So honestly, it looks like he's gonna hold on to Red for a while. That leads us to the current host of Venom and Marvel's terrible whodunit. Let's get started. Our story begins when another one ends, which is pretty by the book for a long-running comic series. The Venom War storyline was basically a tug of war over who gets the Venom symbiote, Dylan, Eddie, or Peter. However, the comic ends with none of them actually getting the symbiote. Injured, Eddie bonds with Red and becomes the new Carnage. Peter is still Spider-Man, so he's gonna be okay, and as we'd find out in all new Venom, Dylan would be taken in by Paul and Mary Jane Watson, where they'd become his foster parents. And yeah, there will be talk about both these characters, don't you worry. Actually, there's going to be talk about a lot of characters, so hang on tight. The main thing is that by the time the Venom War ends, the symbiote bonds with someone new, someone unexpected, and becomes the all-new Venom. I have here issue #1 of All New Venom, which is mostly used to set up the first plot thread of this series, the previously mentioned whodunit. In a court hearing for the villainous Madame Mask, a top-ranking leader of AIM, suddenly the new AIM appears, looking to take her in since she's too dangerous to keep around living. However, a hero arrives to fight AIM. Luke Cage, mayor of New York City. Yeah, I'm willing to bet the people who only know Luke Cage from the Netflix stuff are scratching their heads at that. But honestly, Luke is just one of a few of Marvel's fictional political leaders. Did you know Captain America was president in the Ultimate Universe? And before Luke was president of New York, we also had J. Jonah Jameson. Fun stuff. Anyway, Luke gets tossed out a window and suddenly Venom appears. A new Venom with a kick-ass design. I love the gold coloring and the really sharp look of the new chest logo. After AIM retreats and Madame Mask goes missing, one character who describes himself as an expert on body language comments on how Venom's movements were familiar to him, and deduces that Venom's body language matched the body language of someone in that very courtroom. Let me introduce you to 4 suspects. The 4 people present at the trial who were nowhere to be found when Venom appeared, and the 4 possible hosts. Rick Jones is a character primarily associated with the Hulk due to his time as the character A-Bomb, but he's sort of the quintessential sidekick to a ton of characters in the Marvel Universe. Also, every scene in this comic that he's in, he's going to be wearing a different t-shirt with a different Marvel character on it, and honestly, I found it kind of distracting. For Christ's sake, put on a fucking 5-finger death punch shirt. Anything that lets me know you're actually cool and not just there for the super nerds to relate to. Then there's Robbie Robertson, who is this guy in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. Robbie is of course a journalist, grizzled, smart, and willing to throw himself into situations with superpowered schmucks for a good scoop. He's also Rick's boss right now as editor-in-chief of the Daily Bugle, since Rick is a roving journalist whose specialty is superheroes. Our last 2 suspects are the previously mentioned Madame Mask and Luke Cage, but if you're unfamiliar with either, Madame Mask is a supervillain who wears a golden mask and in this series works alongside MODOK. Luke Cage, meanwhile, is a street-level hero sometimes called Power Man, whose ability is his indestructible skin. He can tank bullets, fire, etc. I'm only going in depth here because this courtroom setup is honestly great, and looking to see who the new Venom is based on personality and what Venom seems to be after is a great hook for this kind of story. I mean, I own paperbacks of every issue so far, and in a world where comics are like $5 a pop, and also really easy to just not buy, I'd say it's a testament to how hooked I was. And to be honest, whoever Venom was based on these 4 suspects, we were in for a good time. Right away, I imagine many others probably immediately discounted Madame Mask. Her character was a villain, and although Venom famously started as a Spider-Man villain, he hadn't fallen back into that role in years at this point. Nowadays, whenever we see Spider-Man vs. Venom, it's usually an alternate universe thing or a flashback. However, if Venom really was suddenly being controlled by someone as mad and villainous as Madame Mask, we could be in for a really cool return to Venom's villain era. Yes, that would have been regressing the symbiote's character by a lot, especially since reconciling with Peter during Venom War, but that was one possibility. Robbie probably would have been the most boring option of the bunch, but it would still be nice to have a legacy Spidey character as Venom once again, especially since their editorials are so close now, and it would give Venom more opportunities to appear as a big part of Peter Parker's life again. Then there's Luke Cage, which honestly I have no complaints with. It would have been really cool to see a fan favorite character like Luke combined with another fan favorite like Venom. All I really have to say there. And Rick, well, Rick's energy is much more in tune with Peter Parker's than the other three, so seeing a younger man wear the black suit while going through his own geeked up life would have been fun. So no matter who Venom was, there was a built-in guarantee that it was gonna be interesting. But then we started trickling down our suspects. Luke Cage, Madame Mask. We get to issue 4 and it's revealed Rick Jones isn't Venom's host, but he is a symbiote host, bonded to Sleeper and going by the name Sleeper Agent. So it's gotta be Robbie then, right? Right? Well, then the doubt sets in. We learn about a new line of covers being made to promote issue 5, the big reveal of who's under the goo, 4 of them with our suspects, and a 5th with a different character entirely. But that doesn't make sense, does it? Then we get the description for the next comic, detailing Mary Jane finding out who's wearing Venom, and revealing that they're stuck together. And that's when one name started cropping up, a name that makes any Spider-Man fan shiver. Paul. Of the characters in the book, there were really only a handful that weren't Venom suspects. You had Dylan, who was looking for Venom, you had Agent Anti-Venom, and you had Mary Jane and Paul. If you don't know who Paul is, consider yourself lucky. Paul is a character who Spider-Man fans have hated for years at this point, since he debuted in 2022. Paul is the current boyfriend of Mary Jane Watson, who she met while in an evil hell dimension created by Paul's father, the Emissary. While Peter fought to get her back, time passed differently for her. Mary Jane and Paul became a couple, and adopted 2 children together. After Mary Jane came back out, it had been literal years for her, and she had moved on from Peter. To this day, Paul and Mary Jane are a couple, with Mary Jane even becoming the superhero jackpot thanks to Paul. So if Paul was Venom, let's just say Venom goes back to a character who ruins Peter's life in so many different ways. On top of this, the story was kind of setting it up. When Venom talks to Dylan, he speaks in a way that's similar to how Paul speaks. Paul was also somewhat more aggressive in All New Venom than he had been before, which is a common side effect of symbiosis. Further than that, Dylan, and by proxy the writer, Al Ewing, teased the idea of Mary Jane and Paul breaking up because they had consistently fought over how to take care of Dylan, and apparently MJ had been skipping out on couples therapy. So we have Venom talking like Paul, and Paul's relationship with Mary Jane in decline, as well as Paul having a special moment with Dylan about how Dylan's been treating him while he looks for Venom. So it's gotta be Paul, right? Right? Thankfully, Venom is not Paul. In fact, the idea of Venom being Paul ended up getting so popular online that someone working on the book had to break their silence on the topic to confirm that Paul was not Venom. Carlos Gomez, the illustrator of the comic, said as much online, stating that he would know since he has to draw Venom. But wait, so then it is Robbie, right? Nope. The story takes a bit of a strange turn, but our next hint came from someone entirely separated from the rest of the book, Peach Momoko. Peach Momoko is an artist and created a special line of variant covers for Marvel, Peach Momoko's Kimono variant covers, featuring a whole slew of Marvel's characters wearing casual kimonos. One of these covers was actually for All New Venom. However, something of note is that of the 19 covers Momoko created, 18 of them were confirmed women. Storm on the cover of Storm makes sense. Jubilee for X-Men? Sure. Tigra on the cover of Moon Knight? It became clear that the theme here wasn't just kimonos, it was women in kimonos. So why then was the All New Venom here? It pointed fans in a new direction. All New Venom could be a woman. But Madame Mask was off the table. So who did that leave? It wouldn't be long after this variant cover trend was discovered that the truth was revealed through a leaked, colorless illustration. Mary Jane Watson. And this immediately sent the fandom into utter disappointment. Not only was the suspect list totally worthless, but Mary Jane seemed like a character they could never imagine being Venom. Marvel must be running out of ideas. Make MJ Venom. Surely people will love that, and they didn't. But before we get into what I think about MJ being Venom, I do want to cover the mystery up until that point. For starters, the main thing that made me not like this twist reveal was that it completely invalidated the reason we had a suspect list in the first place. The body language expert. I guess he was just wrong. Other than that though, there are some pretty neat clues that it really was MJ. Remember how I said that MJ was skipping couples therapy? We weren't ever given a reason for that, and it seemed out of character for MJ. However, if she's Venom, it starts to make sense. Then there's the scene where Paul sends MJ out to find Dylan, even asking if her Jackpot outfit was clean. MJ doesn't seem to go after Dylan as Jackpot, however, and then Venom appears. Later, MJ calls Paul, seemingly not having found Dylan, which is very strange. Although MJ had been relatively background for this story, she was pretty much from the beginning cleverly signaled as a secret suspect, even if the reasoning didn't match why the other four were suspects. But why are fans upset? Well, it really comes down to MJ's character history. Her first ever encounter with Eddie Brock as Venom traumatized her to the point of forcing herself and Peter to move out of their apartment together because of the trauma she had there. Over the years, time and time again, it's been established that MJ hates Venom, even claiming that she hates Venom more than anyone on Earth, while standing next to a guy who Venom centered his life around making miserable. But it's clear Ewing knows this too. Venom themselves confessed in All New Venom that the person they're bonded to is not someone they would ever bond to willingly, but since they didn't have a choice, they had to make it work. And here's the truth about comic book characters that I know no one is going to like to hear. Characters change. For as much as they stay the same, our characters are also evolving in unique ways from writer to writer. In MJ's case, she became Jackpot, a hero with luck-based tech gadgets, and it sucked, but whatever. Now the symbiote and her have a chance to evolve together, and it's honestly not one of the worst ideas I've heard for the character. Pairing up two characters who hate each other and forcing them to develop a mutual respect for one another is a trope that exists to force this kind of evolution. But it's not even like the symbiote hates MJ, really, she's just not all that important to the symbiote before this series. But what I find most interesting is what they have common ground in, what single motivation they have that makes them press on to be a hero. Love and parenthood. I mentioned Dylan coming into the foster care of MJ and Paul before, and in my opinion, MJ being the new Venom cements what their primary motivation is going to be, keeping Dylan safe. The symbiote as one of Dylan's biological parents, and MJ as his adopted one. And I think this is great for MJ because it gives her a second chance at being a mother. Previously, Paul and her had adopted two children while in the emissary's hell dimension. However, this was revealed to be a trick and the children weren't actually real. MJ lost two children in the blink of an eye, and that's not even counting her miscarriage after the events of the Clone Saga, something she'd have no memory of because it happened while she was married to Peter. So MJ having another chance with Dylan I think is going to be hugely important to her character, and it's going to be the path she takes to evolve. As for the symbiote, I admit, the symbiote doesn't really have to be in a story like this, except that it involves Dylan. For the first time, MJ is going to be able to understand one of her children down to their memories, because that's something Venom is going to be capable of. Essentially, I think the all-new Venom being Mary Jane creates a unique opportunity for her character, even if it hampers the symbiote itself a little. And truth be told, I have been enjoying the run so far. This version of Venom is less dark but still very fun and keeps the smack talk going. Oh, but I should bring up, why does Venom need to keep Dylan safe in the first place? Well, it's a convoluted can of worms. Basically, symbiote shenanigans have made the entire world sort of hate these things, whether they're Carnage or Venom, etc. Agent Anti-Venom has been tasked with a new mission: retrieve Venom, or Dylan gets thrown in jail for his connection to the symbiote. This, I think, is going to be the largest plotline yet, and it's going to be the one to show how MJ and Venom are willing to make sacrifices. Namely, I can't see either of these characters letting Dylan come into harm's way. That's my prediction for the next plotline at the very least, which seems to be consistent with what we've seen so far. I also think this series will be working on repairing the fractured relationship between the symbiote and Mary Jane. They can't exactly buddy cop if they aren't in sync, and it's something I think they'll gradually fall into. Like for example, the symbiote could tell MJ that when they first scared her, it wasn't because they wanted to hurt her, they just wanted to get to Spider-Man. It's not something personal, as at the time Venom was just vengeful towards Peter. All of this to say that I see a lot of potential in this series. I mean, Al Ewing wrote The Immortal Hulk, and that's legitimately one of the best comic book series of all time. I think we should probably see where he takes Venom before we decide we don't like it. All that being said, I have to bring up probably the most common criticism of this all-new Venom, And that's this. Venom without Eddie Brock can't really be Venom. Venom is what Eddie and the symbiote called themselves, and Eddie's personality is the one the symbiote takes after the most. The point of the symbiote is that it's Eddie's other, which means it can be read as an inner monologue in some cases, an outside voice in others, or some combination of them both. Venom works best when it's Eddie Brock steering. It's honestly crazy that across Venom's entire existence within Marvel Comics, it's only been attached to Eddie for roughly half of that time. Eddie has been Anti-Venom, the King in Black, Toxin, and most recently Carnage. And during that, the Venom symbiote has been worn by characters like Matt Gargan, Lee Price, and Dylan Brock, none of which feels like the right fit necessarily. So how can Mary Jane feel correct? Well, in my opinion, there's only one proper way to go about it, and if I'm right, Ewing is already setting it up. Meet Agent Venom. Agent Venom is the codename of Flash Thompson, a legacy Spider-Man character. He was Peter's high school bully, but conversely Spider-Man's #1 fan, creating a compelling comical dichotomy. Say that 3 times fast. Anyway, Flash eventually graduated out of Spider-Man comics to become a soldier, and when we next saw him, we learned that he had lost his legs during the war. Flash was then given the Venom symbiote, which enabled him to walk again and create Agent Venom, a soldier with the powers of Spider-Man. What makes Flash different than pretty much every other symbiote host, including Eddie Brock, was the nature of his relationship with the symbiote. Flash used its powers, yes, but he also had to keep it in check or he risked going somewhat berserk and lost control of the symbiote. Eventually, Flash would lose the Venom symbiote, but later on would gain a new version of Anti-Venom, creating Agent Anti-Venom and restoring him to basically the same level of coolness he was at before. But did you catch what made Flash different? Unlike Lee Price or Matt Gargan, Flash wasn't just in symbiosis with the symbiote, he actively had to keep it in check. There would be times where Flash and Venom would disagree, and although they had these complications, they needed one another. Flash needed Venom to be the hero that he always wanted to be, and Venom needed a host to live but preferred someone with more bite than Flash had. It creates this really interesting relationship that few other hosts have or had. I would honestly argue the closest we've seen to that since is currently the relationship between Eddie Brock and Carnage. But in that case, it's clear that Carnage is much more in control than Venom previously was with Flash. Side note that's being added in later, so if that's why I sound different, you know. I totally neglected to mention that the reason Flash's time with the symbiote was so significant, for not just Flash, but for Venom itself, was because this is when Venom became more heroic. That give and take relationship between Flash and Venom ended up transforming both characters pretty permanently. I don't think when I first wrote this script out I made the point well enough, but this is what I'm shooting for here. For both host and symbiote to evolve into something new together rather than one control the other. And this is something we've really only ever seen in Eddie and Flash, and I'm hoping we'll see in Mary Jane. So how does this translate to Mary Jane's all-new Venom? Well, to put simply, we already have a case where the symbiote and host naturally aren't fond of one another. They'll be united by their goal to protect Dylan, but while they're still butting heads, things won't always go their way. So far, the all-new Venom has been on the sloppier side of things, focusing their fights on reducing casualties and protecting civilians rather than taking down the bad guy, which only leads to the bad guy hurting even more people. I think when Flash Thompson's Agent Anti-Venom comes into the fray, his role will be in helping Mary Jane find the balance between Venom and herself, enabling her to use Venom's powers more efficiently, and tap into the more barbaric side of the symbiote that previous hosts have been able to use. Honestly, I can understand people being upset with Venom being Mary Jane, but I think that really stems from one complaint. Eddie Brock isn't Venom yet again. Despite Eddie being the Venom, Marvel consistently has the two separated, and it's pretty hard to forgive. We're fans of Venom, and to most of us, that Venom is and always should be Eddie Brock. And while I agree and empathize, I think just this once we should wait and see. I've been enjoying Eddie Brock Carnage, and I think All New Venom has the opportunity to do something really cool with Mary Jane and Venom, and create a new, interesting dynamic and opportunity for both characters to grow. That's really the point of this video. I'm telling Venom fans that we should just wait and see. I think Ewing has some great ideas and he's definitely a skilled writer, so maybe the surprises in store for us will be for the best. My one caveat is that I hope Venom and Eddie get back together and relatively soon. I know Carnage is going to be a member of the new Thunderbolts and it's likely meant to be Eddie Brock's Carnage, which definitely worries me, but who knows? Eddie could always swap symbiotes and get Venom back. Just wait and see. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.